You woke before the sun, your body heavy from yet another restless night. The faint, bitter scent of oil, thick and pungent, clung stubbornly to the ropes you handled. Every frayed fiber, a silent witness to years of unseen labor. Dust settled quietly at your feet, coarse and dry, pressing into the cracks beneath your bare soles, as the cold wood beneath creaked softly with each hesitant step. Around you, stillness draped the landscape, a weight that settled deep within your chest, broken only by the gentle rustle of leaves stirring in a whispering breeze. The pale gray-blue wash of dawn barely touched the horizon, a muted promise of light that you scarcely noticed. You stood at the bridge, a fragile artery stretching across the slow-moving river below. The village behind remained cloaked in a thin veil of mist, sleepy shapes barely tracing, rooftops and chimneys all muted under a sky too tired to brighten fully. Your worn woolen cloak, frayed and threadbare, fell heavy against your skin, its rough texture a constant reminder of the line you walked daily, guardian and prisoner of this quiet passage. The air was cold enough to bite, but not yet sharp enough to sting, and you breathed in the scent of damp earth mixed with the faintest whisper of smoke, lingering from last night's fading hearths. If a dead phone battery today could cause panic, you thought, what dread must have filled the heart when your only source of light was a fragile ember threatening to die in the hearth. You pulled your cloak tighter against the persistent chill, a weak shield against the encroaching fatigue. Your routine unfolded slowly, painfully deliberate. You knelt, fingers tracing the worn fibers of each rope binding the gate, the roughness unapologetically real against your skin. The creak of wood beneath your weight echoed softly, a soundtrack of small movements connecting you to this bridge, this threshold between safety and the unknown. From time to time, a distant bird call punctuated the stillness, its mournful note stretching thin in the cold air, barely reaching your ears. You paused, the trembling in your hands almost imperceptible, as you inspected a knot that threatened to fray, an overlooked imperfection that could tip the balance between stability and collapse. The day after day slipped into itself, a monotony broken only by the faint changes you sensed but did not yet see. The low murmur of distant voices halted abruptly. The dogs, usually barking to greet the dawn, fell silent. Neighboring windows flickered with cautious light. Eyes meeting briefly in shadowed acknowledgement. There was a shift, a subtle tension threading through the village, delicate like a spider's web trembling in the breeze. You felt it coil tight inside your chest, a silent warning not to trust even the familiar. The weight of vigilance settled deeper, a slow tightening knot as you knelt once more by the gate, hands moving carefully along the ropes. Every small sound gained prominence, the steady drip of water, the faint scrape of a boot on stone far below, the hum of insects waking reluctantly from their own uneasy rest. You were alone, held in the stillness between shadows and dawn, guarding more than wood and rope, the fragile peace that kept disaster at bay. Before the bridge whispered its secrets further, before the unseen threat could make itself known, pause for a moment. Hey, before Morpheo takes you under completely, double check if you're still subscribed. Sometimes the button disappears, and I don't want you to miss the upcoming stories for sleep. While you're at it, leave a like as soft as a pillow. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your interaction keeps this little corner of calm alive. Thanks for being part of it. You rose slowly from your knees, the roughness of the rope still pressed faintly into your palms, a reminder of the fragile threshold between safety and fragility. The cold air clung to your face, subtle droplets of mist mingling with the faint sweat beating at your temples. The river below moved quietly, its dark water reflecting the dull grayness of the sky as a soft current pushed fallen leaves along its surface, each one a tiny, unhurried voyage into the unknown. The bridge beneath your feet seemed to breathe with the slow, measured creaks of wood straining under years of age, every plank whispering stories lost to time. At this hour, the world was muted, a half-light suspended between night and the hesitant arrival of dawn. Your gaze drifted toward the village, still shrouded in mist. Shapes of fumbling shadows traced rooftops and chimneys, but no movement stirred more vigorously than the faint whisper of a curtain fluttering outside a shuttered window. A low, distant hum of voices flickered briefly like a dying ember, then vanished entirely, swallowed by the cold calm. Dogs remained silent, their usual barking absent, as if the day itself hesitated to begin. You tucked the hem of your cloak tighter beneath your arms. The weight of this silence pressed into your chest, each breath an effort against the thick, nameless apprehension curling inside you. You listened for the quiet shifts that could herald more than the mundane. The steady drip of water from the iron pipes below marked time, each drop a soft, hollow pulse in the still air. Somewhere nearby, a distant owl gave a solitary call, its voice lingering, stretched thin like a thread barely holding against the void. Your eyes settled on the gate, tethered by ropes that groaned under. Unseen strain. The fibers bowed and twisted, worn by years of ceaseless tension, but still holding. You knelt once more to inspect. The frayed strand that had teased your notice the day before now stretched tighter, threatening to unravel under unseen weight. Your fingers moved slowly, carefully, brushing each thread as though coaxing a fragile heartbeat to persevere. The rough texture was a low hum beneath your touch, Familiar yet fragile. You circled the knot again, tracing the pattern of wear, the subtle shadows that the emerging light failed to erase. Around you, the faint rustle of leaves whispered secrets on the breeze, soft and indistinct. You inhaled deeply, the smell of cold wood smoke entwined with lingering moisture, filling your lungs with a muted sharpness. You exhaled slowly, the breath lingering in the chill air before fading into silence once more. The weight of hours pressing upon you made every movement deliberate, each breath, each touch an anchor in this fragile moment. A shift in the wind carried a distant murmur, a ripple in the quiet that heightened the tautness wrapped around your senses. Your fingers returned to the ropes, tracing the worn fibers again. The knot resisted, stubborn and taut, but an almost imperceptible looseness teased at its edges. Time stretched, moments blending into one another as you worked deliberately, almost reverently, to reinforce what held the balance between this place's peace and the looming threat just beyond your gaze. The creak of the wood under your weight was amplified in the stillness, reminding you of each cautious step taken in this silent vigil. There was no rush here, no clamor, only the endless, measured ebb of a task that demanded patience and care. In the distance, a single bell rang low, its sound spreading slowly across the village like a whispered warning, yet muffled under the heavy layers of mist and quiet. You stayed rooted, every sense alert but restrained. You knew the tension was not born of sudden horrors, but brewed quietly in the space between known and unknown, in the flicker of shadows cast by a wind that spoke but did not shout. The world held its breath beside you. The wooden planks beneath your boots seemed to pulse in subtle rhythm with your heartbeat, every grain and crack a delicate trace beneath your awareness. As you rose, the tremble in your legs felt like the soft hum of an unseen wire stretched too tightly. You pulled your cloak tighter once more, the threadbare fabric a thin, colder barrier against the creeping fatigue that kissed your skin like a gentle, persistent tide. Your eyes swept again across the bridge, the ropes, the river, the sleeping village beyond. Each element poised in stillness, balanced on the fragile edge of what might come. Slowly, you turned toward the narrow path that led away from the bridge, shadowed trees arching overhead, their leaves whispering secrets only half heard. The cold pressed deeper into your bones, and the faintest flicker of light caught your attention. A low glow through the trees, flickering softly, like the heartbeat of a dying ember struggling to stay alive. You stepped forward, your footsteps uneven and cautious, the slow rhythm of your breath matching the deliberate pace of your progress. Something waited there, just beyond the veil of fog and shadow, a presence felt but never seen, a hesitation in the air, that set your skin to prickle. Despite the chill, you paused, the quiet humming of the village behind you fading into the distance, the flickering light casting long, wavering shapes across the path. The tension tightened again, an invisible thread stretched taut, waiting for the moment to pull taut or snap. Before you could move further, a soft, sudden cracking broke the stillness. A twig underfoot, perhaps, but in this silence, every sound carried weight. Your breath caught. The bridge, the ropes, the river, all seemed to hold their breath with you. And then, a shadow shifted just beyond the reach of the dim light, lingering long enough to remind you that the quiet was never empty. You stepped closer to the flickering glow nestled beyond the trees, the faintest warmth casting uneven, wavering shadows along the path. Each careful footfall disturbed a thin layer of damp leaves, their crisp husks crunching softly underfoot, while the air around you thickened with cold mist that curled and eddied like silent spirits pressing against your skin. The low hum of the village had ebbed nearly entirely, leaving only the distant heartbeat of the river and the uneven rustle of restless branches swaying just out of reach. You drew in a breath. The wet earth smelled richer here, mingled with the sharp tang of rotting wood and the distant, fading scent of smoke that clung to your cloak like a fading memory. Your gaze traced the slow dance of shadows flickering ahead. The glow pulsed gently, less a flame and more a hesitant promise struggling against the night's grasp. It felt both welcoming and wary, like a tired candle flickering against drafts in a forgotten room. With each step, the cold seemed to deepen, settling into your bones, urging you to move slowly, to carry the weight of the moment carefully, as if disturbing the balance could snap something unseen. The trees arched overhead, their skeletal branches interlaced like fingers pressed against the thickening gloom. You felt held inside a fragile cage of quiet, where sound was muffled, and the edge between what was known and what slipped into shadow was razor sharp. You ran your fingertips along the bark of a nearby trunk, the rough grooves biting faintly into your skin, solid and unyielding beneath your touch. That solidity was a tether to reality, a faint reassurance amid the creeping uncertainty. Further down the path, the soft light was swallowed gradually by dense fog, rising like a slow tide. It filled the clearing ahead with a pregnant silence, one swollen with possibility and the unspoken threat of what might linger just beyond sight. Your breath came out in measured puffs that faded quickly into the cool air, each one a reminder of the fragile warmth you carried within, a steady pulse against the biting cold. The dampness clung to your cloak, seeping slowly through the worn fabric, chilling your shoulders with patient persistence. You stopped, eyes adjusting to the shifting light, scanning the haze until a flicker of movement caught your attention, a silhouette that melted almost instantly into the gray. It barely disturbed the mist, but you felt its presence press heavy against your senses, a weight that did not belong to wind or shadow. Your heartbeat slowed, matching the rhythm of the river below, steady but watchful. The silence tightened around you like a drawn cord, stretching taut with expectation. Your fingers curled around a small stone at your side, rough and cool, its weight grounding you as you took a slow, deliberate step forward. The ground beneath your boots was soft and uneven, a patchwork of moss and crushed leaves damp from the morning mist. The distant call of a lone bird shattered the stillness for a brief moment, a high, keening note that floated like a thread unraveling in the thick air, then fell silent, swallowed again by the fog. The ropes at your waist shifted lightly as you adjusted your cloak, the worn fibers whispering promises of endurance and fragile strength. You could feel the tension in the fibers, pressed tightly against your skin, a reminder of the thin line between holding firm and unraveling completely. Every knot was a story of patience, every fray a marker of battles won quietly over time. Your breath slowed to careful pulls, and you felt your senses sharpen, not to alarm, but to steady yourself in this suspended moment. The mist began to part faintly ahead, revealing a small clearing framed by thick, leaning branches stained dark with moisture. There, the flickering glow you followed revealed itself fully, a dying ember's light, barely clinging to the last scraps of warmth, the remnants of a fire reduced to stubborn ash and soft smoke. Around it lay scattered bits of wood half consumed, their edges glowing faintly like the memories of heat. You knelt slowly beside the ember, the cold ground pressing harshly through the fabric of your cloak. The air tasted of charcoal and old rain, and as you reached a hand out, the heat met your skin, the gentlest pulse, a final heartbeat. You traced a finger through the ash, stirring the fragile remnants, careful not to extinguish the stubborn flicker. The ember seemed to breathe with you, tiny sparks rising and falling like soft sighs, a quiet resistance to the enveloping cold. Behind you, the fog deepened, swallowing the path and the watchful river beyond. A distant chime echoed, faint and uneven, like a scattered thought barely grasped. Your heart stirred uneasily at the sound, a reminder that you were not as alone as the silence suggested. Rising, you left the ember sheltered beneath a fold of your cloak, a secret glow against the growing chill. Each step back toward the bridge pressed heavier with the weight of unseen eyes, the cold no longer only of weather, but of anticipation folded into the morning's breath. You moved slowly, every movement deliberate, a guardian weaving through shadows, tethered between the dim light of fading warmth and the hush of what waited just beyond. As you reached the bridge, your gaze caught movement again, a flicker at the water's edge, a shadow bending just beyond the reach of the dim dawn. The world held its breath with you, the weight of what was and what might come, balanced on the tipping edge, silent and watchful. And in the faint light, you understood. Something beyond the mist had begun to stir, patient and lingering, waiting for its moment to cross the fragile threshold where night meets day. You moved forward from the ember's glow, each step muffled by the soaking mist that pooled between ancient roots and scattered leaves. The trees stretched like somber guards overhead, their branches tangled and brittle, a lattice of shadow marking the fragile divide between past and unseen futures. The damp seeped slowly into your worn cloak, a slow, insistent chill that claimed your skin in quiet increments, soft as a sigh, but persistent as time. Your breath drew shallow, cautious, tightening with every exhale, as the thick air seemed to cling to your lungs, reluctant to release you. The path beneath your boots twisted unevenly, stones slick from night's lingering dew, each precarious foothold a whispered warning to move with care. The river's murmur faded gently behind you, swallowed by the chorus of frogs croaking their hesitant dawn hymns, voices thin and sporadic in the morning hush. The world held itself suspended, the mist a shroud weaving stillness between what was known and what hovered beyond, a teasing veiling that invited your senses to strain deeper. The cold seeped beneath your collar, tracing delicate fingers between your skin and wool, a ghostly touch tethering you to the lingering dark. Your fingers brushed absent-mindedly against the ropes coiled at your waist, the frayed fibers whispering quiet histories. Struggles met without shout, tensions held in silence. Ahead, the path narrowed, flanked by twisted roots that rose like gnarled fingers reaching from forgotten graves. You stepped slowly, the slow rhythm of your footsteps a deliberate metronome against the fragile quiet. A subtle shift brushed your helix, a rustle, a soft sigh of movement that did not belong to leaf or wing. Your heart ticked upward, steady but taut, as the faint outline of a figure slipped momentarily into the fog's half-light, vanishing before you could fully grasp its shape. The moment stretched, fragile and unyielding, held like a breath caught in the throat of the forest. Your eyes darted, searching for any flicker of recognition or threat. But the mist swallowed the form whole, leaving only the echo of pressed leaves beneath feet you could not see. You swallowed thickly, the dry scrape of your throat more pronounced in the stillness. A solitary sound swallowed immediately by the steady pulse of the river far below. A tendril of fog curled close to your face, threading a cold kiss along your cheek, coaxing you forward, and yet holding you back with equal measure. Your steps slowed further as you approached a fallen tree, its massive trunk cloaked in moss, dampened into dark velvet. The moss yielded faintly under fingertip, cool and soft as a whisper of forgotten time, grounding you in the moment, even as the world blurred at its edges. Behind you, the village slumbered beneath its blanket of mist, silent and distant. The faint clatter of an early bell from the church tower drifted weakly across the waking sky, its resonance thin and fading, like the last murmurs of a dream slipping away. Somewhere, perhaps, someone stirred, but here, in the embrace of the forest, only the cautious breaths of the morning filled the space between shadow and light. You bent to gather a handful of fallen twigs, their dry, brittle texture crackling faintly under the press of your fingers. The scent of damp earth rose sharply as you lifted them, mingling with the fading trace of smoke carried faintly on the breeze. A hesitant warmth against the encroaching chill. The fire's ember, nestled under your cloak, seemed to pulse with renewed life, a quiet defiance against the morning cold, the stubborn heartbeat of a fragile hope. Each movement felt measured, a ritual carved from necessity and shadow. You arranged the twigs carefully, layering them with the patience of a craftsman, coaxing fragile flame from reluctant ash. The air seemed to thicken, as if even the very mist waited, bated breath caught between what was and might yet unfold. A faint tapping sounded from somewhere deep within the woods. A slow, deliberate rhythm, uneven, like a code whispered in Morse across the hollow spaces. Your body tensed as you turned, seeking the source amid the thickening gray. The trees stood still, statuesque and silent, but the shadows seemed to stir along the edges of your vision, flickering with something not quite natural. The cold pressed deeper, sinking into your bones, tightening its grip with an unspoken warning. Your hands trembled just enough as you reached for the ember again, shielding it with a fold of your cloak. The fragile, light, promising sanctuary, even as uncertainty crept close. A sudden hush fell. The restless sounds of awakening creatures stilled, as if pulled under a dark spell. The brittle twigs yielded a spark, at last, a soft flare blossoming into a pale flame. The fire's gentle heat whispered warmth against your cold fingers, its glow pulsing gently, painting your face with flickering light and shadow. It was a fragile victory. A slow breath of comfort, swallowed almost immediately by the vastness of unseen eyes. You allowed yourself a moment, the quiet radiance humming softly against the dark. The forest seemed to lean in, a silent witness bearing down with weight both old and unknowable. Then from the depths where shadow tangled with fog, a sharp creak echoed, wood bending under subtle pressure, or perhaps the cautious step of something waiting, watching. Your breath caught, slow and steady, fingers tightening around the rope at your waist as you faced the stillness beyond. A figure emerged at last, neither friend nor foe, but a presence that folded seamlessly into the pallid light, swallowed by the mist as quickly as it came. The ember's flame flickered violently in the sudden breath of wind, then steadied, coaxed back to fragile life. You held your ground, senses straining, heart tightening to a slow drum, as the quiet hung heavy between you. And in that brittle pause, you understood. This was no longer simply a waking, but a crossing, the boundary thinning between safety and the threat lurking just beyond. The day had barely begun, and already you were standing at the edge of something that could not be turned away. The mist shifted again, and just beyond, the fragile glow, the shadow moved, deliberate, patient, and waiting to step fully into sight. You stepped carefully back onto the bridge, the worn planks shifting faintly beneath the weight of your boots. The chill of morning clung stubbornly to your skin, threading its way through the thin layers of your cloak like a silent whisper. Above you, the skeletal branches of the trees arched and entwined, a fragile latticework against the dim, mist-heavy sky. The faint glow of the ember, nestled close to your chest, pulsed softly, a heartbeat in the quiet air. With every slow breath, you felt the dampness of the mist settle deeper into the fibers of your cloak, cold and insistent, a reminder of the relentless passage of time and the fragile warmth you carried within. The river below murmured steadily, its voice muted by distance and thickened fog, each ripple a ripple of quiet persistence beneath the guarded silence that enveloped you. Your fingers grazed again the ropes coiled at your waist, the roughness tangible beneath your skin, every frayed thread a story of endurance and fragile hope. The knots held firm, yet an unspoken tension wove itself between those fibers, like the invisible threads of a trap, poised to tighten without warning. You shifted your weight deliberately, feeling the subtle shift in the air, a whisper of movement that spoke of secrets yet to unfold. The creak of wood like a distant sigh, echoing across the stillness. Ahead, the path wound deeper into the shadows, where the mist gathered, like breath held in waiting. The faint flicker of light you had followed ebbed and shimmered uncertainly, near to fading. You stepped forward, your boots pressing softly into the earth, damp with morning dew. Each footfall measured, cautious, a fragile pulse of the ember's glow. The air smelled sharply of wet leaves and old smoke, mingling with the hum of distant insects shaking off their sluggish sleep. The faint scent was earthy and broken, like the sigh of a forest stirring beneath an unseen weight. A subtle rustling brushed your ear, a soft sigh of wind, or perhaps something more deliberate. Yet the fog swallowed any shape or sound before it could settle. You paused under a wide bough, its twisted limbs dangling low, slick with moisture. Your hand reached out, tracing the rough bark, the grooves pressing cool and certain against your skin. The texture was steady, a reassurance in a world bristling with waiting shadows. Your breath came out slow, mingling with the fog in faint clouds that vanished almost as soon as they formed. The uneven path narrowed further, flanked by roots twisting like gnarled fingers through the spongy soil and fallen leaves. You moved with the cautious patience of one bearing a fragile treasure, the ember's gentle warmth pressing softly against the cold metal at your side. The forest blurred at the edges of your vision, shadows pooling and shifting like restless ghosts just beyond reach. A distant bird called hungrily, a high, thin note that sliced through the heavy stillness. It hung for a moment, fragile and exposed, then faded into the fog's embrace. The silence returned swiftly, settling thick and unyielding. Your heartbeat slowed, drawn taut against the quiet, each thud a bridge between caution and resolve. As you rounded a narrow bend, a flicker of movement caught your eye. A shadow slipped soundlessly among the tangled trunks. The figure lingered, just a breath beneath the edge of the fog, neither rushing nor retreating, as if bound by some slow, patient waiting. Your breath stilled, every muscle taut, the ember's warmth, a quiet defiance against the creeping cold. Your stomach knotted with a slow, twisting tension as you considered stepping closer, yet time seemed thick and unyielding. The moment stretched long, the weight of unseen eyes pressing in from all sides. You felt as though the forest itself held its breath, watching with silent patience, waiting for the fragile balance to tip. Behind you, the faint clang of the village bell drifted weakly through the mist, a soft tolling that seemed both distant and urgent. The sound stirred a wave of faint unease, threading its way through the whispering branches and tangled underbrush. Somewhere deep beneath the surface of calm, something ancient slipped just beyond your senses. You shifted. Slightly, the dry crackle of twigs underfoot, too sharp and sudden in the dense quiet. The ember's light flickered violently, shadows dancing wild along the trunks and brambles. You cupped the glow carefully with your hands, shielding it from the sudden whisper of a colder breeze. Warmth blossomed faintly beneath your palms, fragile and fleeting. The figure moved again, slow, deliberate steps threading through the misty veil. You could not be certain of its shape, too veiled, too caught in the shifting haze, but the presence held steady, patient as the turning world. There was no frantic flight here, no hint of fear or aggression, only an inscrutable watchfulness that pressed close, like the slow tightening of a rope. Your gaze flickered to the river's edge, where shadows pooled in darker shapes, rippling slightly as unseen currents whispered beneath the surface. The world balanced uneasily on a knife edge between dusk and dawn, between safety and the uncertain pulse of lurking threats. Just beyond the fragile veil of mist. For a long moment you stood, rooted in the folding silence, the slow, steady rhythm of your breath mingling with the faint crackling of leaves pressed beneath cautious boots. Both yours and those too shy or too patient to appear fully. The ember's glow dimmed slightly, but a stubborn warmth held fast beneath the fading light. And then, just as the first fragile sliver of sun bled pale across the horizon, the shadow stepped fully free of the fog, its shape unmoving, waiting, watched by a pair of eyes as old and steady as the slow, silent river running beneath your feet. You stepped cautiously away from the fading ember, its stubborn glow now a faint promise, shriveled beneath. The mists slow encroach, the damp earth pressed cold and unyielding beneath your boots, each step sinking softly into the softened carpet of moss and scattered leaves, their muted crunch swallowed quickly by the fog's thick embrace. The trees bowed overhead, their skeletal branches tracing fragile arches against the pale, swelling light. A quiet skeleton of the old world, silhouetted against a sky just beginning to awaken. Your breath formed gentle clouds, rising and blending with the mist, each exhale a whisper that vanished almost before it was born. The forest seemed to pulse in rhythm with your careful movements, as though the very air held its breath alongside you. Every sound was magnified by the stillness. Distant water trickling along unseen streams, the subtle creak of ancient bark responding to a tentative stir in the breeze, and beneath it all, the faint shiver of your own heartbeat. You slowed further, feeling the chill spread like a soft frost through your cloak, knitting its cold threads through your skin. Your fingers brushed absently across the rough bark of a gnarled tree, its texture rough and honest beneath your touch, grounding you in moments both fragile and endless. The space between the branches pulled tight, and you found yourself folding into the hush, as if the forest were enclosing you in a quiet waiting room between what had passed and what was yet to come. A throat tight with unused words parted your lips for a breath you kept. The deeper shadows at the edge of the path seemed to thicken, their darkness reluctant to dissolve as dawn's weak light seeped into the world. Your eyes caught a flicker, a movement, a slip of shadow, where none should have been, vanishing before you could gather its shape. Your pulse steady but sharp, you followed the path's slow winding curve, your boots pressing gently into earth softened by the night's tears. The whisper of a distant bell slid faintly across the air, its slow, somber peal urging caution, threading through the half-dark like a distant murmur from a half-forgotten dream. Beneath it, small voices stirred somewhere far outside this silent cathedral of trees. A murmur felt rather than heard, quiet rustlings of a village just beginning to rouse, hesitant as you. The cold wrapped tighter around your shoulders, clutching at your spine with slow persistence, as the warning of unrevealed perils. You paused, hands resting against your cloak, where the ember's faint warmth nestled beneath the fabric. The fragile glow was a heartbeat in the dark, a reminder of softness and endurance amid the rigidity of shadow and cold. The mist curled around you like a living thing, teasing your senses with chilly whispers that skirted just beyond the edge of sight, weaving threads of unease and fragile hope in the same breath. Footsteps, barely more than a sigh, echoed from deeper within the woods. Your gaze sharpened, tracing the thin layers of fog that wreathed the ancient trunks. The sounds were patient, deliberate, dragging long moments of waiting into the chill air. You breathed low, synchronizing with the slow sliding rhythm of threat and promise that hung between the trees. The forest around you brimmed with watching eyes unseen, their silent weight heavy on your skin. A slight shift in the wind carried with it the acrid trace of smoke, stale, cold, touched with the decay of ember turned ash. In that instant, the shadows deepened, folding tighter around the trees, reaching out as if to draw the light from your fragile glow. Every breath drew colder, every heartbeat echoed slower, and the path beneath seemed to stretch endlessly, pulling the moment thin. Your muscles coiled as you took a careful step backward, the soft snap of a broken twig beneath foot striking sharp in the quiet. The fragile ember flared, a tremor of reluctant light that danced briefly against the rising gloom. Your fingers clenched around the rope belt at your waist, the frayed fibers cutting quietly into your skin, a tether to the world as thin and vital as a lifeline. The forest held, frozen in a suspended breath, as the slow pulse of life and shadow coiled tighter. Branches swayed without wind, their movements distant and strange, casting wavering shapes that dripped like ink onto the pale carpet of morning dew. Your eyes strained, piercing the fog where the figure had slipped moments ago, still waiting, patient, held at the edge of vision, neither friend nor foe, but something else entirely. Then, from the gloom, came the faintest click, a sound neither natural nor hurried. Your breath caught, and your pulse pulsed in that fragile pause. All at once, the silence ruptured. A slender thread of light, thin as a slit of sky, pierced the canopy far ahead. The shifting shadows shuddered. The ember's glow steadied, stubborn and small, held fast against the pulling dark. You stepped forward, drawn unwillingly toward that tentative crack. The mist flickered uncertainly, as if holding its breath, the cold pressing deep, relentless. The figure watched, waiting patient as a stone's skip, a boundary between night and day, thinning like fragile glass ready to fracture. And then, as your hand reached out to cross that trembling threshold, something whispered behind you, a soft, insistent rustle that rose like a breath from the earth itself, promising that what had stirred beyond the mist was only just beginning to unfold. You hesitated a moment at the edge of the path where the fog curled and thickened like slow, reluctant breath. The pale wash of dawn felt distant here, swallowed by the dense shroud hanging heavy between twisted trunks. Your boots sank softly into the damp earth, the moss a cold cushion beneath the persistent weight of the morning's chill. Every step forward was measured, deliberate, a slow communion with a world held fragile and thinly veiled in shadow. The ember, nestled close beneath your cloak, pulsed faintly, a stubborn heartbeat amid the damp and the decay. Its reluctant warmth pressed softly against your side, steady as the silent river beneath the bridge, its course hidden from your sight, but ever present. The air tasted sharp, wet leaves and old smoke mingling with the faint copper tang of cold metal, still lingering on your skin. A distant caw split the quiet, raw and ragged, trembling long in the air before fading into the lingering mist like a forgotten thread. Ahead, the path narrowed between gnarled roots and leaf-strewn earth, the ground uneven and slick from last night's rain. Your fingers brushed again against the rope coiled at your waist, rough and frayed, an anchor to reality in a world that felt poised on hesitation. Each knot bore silent testimony, battles waged quietly in the gray before dawn, threads pulled taut at the edge of unraveling. You sense the weight of unseen eyes, a slow pressure pressing at the nape of your neck, urging, warning, but never revealing. Your breath came slow, steady, a rhythm to steady the sharp beat of watchfulness. The fog shifted, a pale tide curling close against your cheeks, fingers of damp cold weaving through your cloak's threadbare weave. You trace the rough bark of a nearby tree, its cool grooves biting faintly into your skin, solid and immutable against the slow erosion of uncertainty. The forest held its silence like a restrained breath, as if unwilling or perhaps unable to break the fragile vigil it guarded. A soft rustling whispered just beyond the edge of sight, a subtle, almost hesitant sound, like fabric brushed against stone. Your senses narrowed, catching the faintest flicker of movement amid the thick arms of shadow and mist. The figure appeared briefly, silhouette blurred by the shifting veil, unmoving yet impossibly present. Half-formed, a shadow breathed into life by the heavy air. Your heart tightened with quiet dread, slow and measured, threading through your chest like the unwinding line of rope at your waist. Each step toward that lingering shape was cautious, every motion encapsulated in slow, weighty detail. The cold seeped deeper still, threading icy veins through your muscles, making your limbs deliberate, resistive against the urge to quicken pace. The ember's glow was fragile, flickering like a hesitant breath in the gathering gloom, fragile as the threads binding the gate behind you. You cradled that warmth beneath a fold of your cloak, the small steady heat pushing back against the fall of cold shadows. The path bent sharply, revealing a glade where ancient trees leaned close, their trunks blackened with age and moisture. Veins of moss clung to the bark, soft as whispers lost to time. Your boots pressed gently into mud softened by night's tears, sending faint ripples through the stillness. A distant drip of water fell intermittently from a hanging branch, hollow and careful. The echo threaded the hush like a slow ticking clock, thick with the weight of waiting. Your gaze circled the clearing, tracing the movement of mist as it crawled low. Slow fingers tracing the sharp edge between breath and shadow. The figure lingered at the perimeter, more presence than shape, its form shifting with the pulse of fog and failing light. You dared not move closer. The silence was a fragile web that might snap with any stirring. Instead, you sank slowly to one knee, feeling the cool earth through the worn fabric of your cloak, grounding yourself in patience and the steady pulse of quiet resolve. The ember darkened briefly, shadows swallowing its lazy flickers, but the warmth endured, stubborn as your vigil. The faint scent of wet pine and scorched wood brushed your nostrils, a scent both grounding and distant, like an echo from a fading dream. Your fingers traced absently over the rope's fibers, reassurance in their rough texture. The low hum beneath your touch, a tether to the world still turning beyond this suspended moment. A soft sound reached your ears, a step, balanced and deliberate, and the air shifted as the figure hesitated. It was neither threatening nor welcoming, but instead held a quiet watchfulness that pressed close, a waiting that refused to be rushed. You imagined the slow, patient weaving of tension, the poised balance between recognition and retreat. The day was beginning its slow crawl forward, but here time was caught in the murmur between heartbeats. Then, just as the first faint slice of sunlight kissed the ragged edge of the trees, the shadow stepped fully into view. Its features remained obscured, blurred by mist and distance. But the weight of its presence settled like a stone dropped in still water, rippling through your very core. The ember's glow flickered fiercely in your grasp before settling once more, a fragile beacon against the swelling dark. Your breath caught as the figure held steady, eyes unseen but felt, watching, waiting, patient beyond measure. The forest around you murmured softly, the slow exhale of wind lifting the fog in restless flickers. In that delicate moment, suspended between night's retreat and day's hesitant arrival, you understood at last. The quiet was no longer empty. Something had awakened within the mist, and it was no longer content to hide. You stepped forward, the pale light of dawn casting a muted glow over the still forest, the mist curling around your ankles like silent fingers reluctant to let go. The weight of the ember pressed softly beneath your cloak, a stubborn pulse of warmth that breathed steadily against the creeping chill. The ground beneath your boots shifted unevenly, soft with damp moss and brittle with fallen leaves. Each footfall muffled into the silence that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. The trees towered above you, their twisted limbs silhouetted like aching bones against the pale sky. Whispers of wind threading thin through the branches. You moved deliberately, each curious breath drawing in the sharp scent of wet earth, mingled with faint traces of smoke and the sour tang of rotting wood left by time's slow decay. The air felt heavy, hanging dense with the kind of quiet that was not empty, but waiting with a patience that stretched the very fabric of the morning. Your fingers brushed the rough bark of a nearby trunk, the texture uneven and cold, grounding your senses in the moment, even as shadows flickered at the edge of your vision. A soft rustle stirred somewhere close, a cautious movement pressed against the stillness, a breath held too long. You halted, every nerve taut, the fragile light of the ember flickering as if stirred by your own tension. A forest seemed to lean in, a silent audience to the slow dance of presence and absence. The narrow path ahead twisted like a thin, uncertain thread, weaving through darkness and light, the moss-damp earth curving upward slightly. Beneath ancient roots that rose like gnarled fingers, clutching at hidden graves. You stepped lightly, the faint crackle of twigs crushed underfoot, snapping sharply in the dense hush. The ember glowed faintly closer to your heart, soft warmth pressing against ribs chilled by the thickening mist. A slender shape slipped within the fog, a movement so subtle you could have mistaken it for shadow itself. Your breath caught, slow and steady, anticipation rippling through muscles held rigid by cautious resolve. The figure lingered just beyond the gleam of the ember's glow, half hidden amid the creepers and moss-streaked trunks, watching without the need to move. A delicate tension curled tight within you, strung like a silent thread stretched between dusk and dawn. You took a measured step forward, the worn rope at your waist tightening slightly as if mirroring the slow coil of nervous energy in your limbs. The air was thick with waiting, each inhalation a slow pull against the invisible weight pressing deep into your senses. Around you, the forest seemed suspended in a delicate balance, the soft drip of water from leaves, the whisper of branches swaying in a wind felt but unseen, the occasional distant call of a bird swallowed quickly into distance. Ahead, the dim shape flickered uncertainly, then held, still and watchful. You could sense the difference between presence and threat, a quiet boundary just beneath the skin, and you stayed rooted in place, cautious, yet unwilling to turn away. Time blurred at the edges, stretched long by patience and the steady rhythm of your heartbeat. The mist thickened suddenly, a slow flood pooling at your feet, swallowing the underbrush and softening the earth's rough edges. The embers glow dimmed briefly, then pulsed once more, a faint heartbeat resisting the cold encroachment. For a moment, the world held its breath alongside you, fragile and taut. A distant bell tolled softly from the village, its faint pealing drifting across the woodland like a ghostly cadence, fragile and fading. The sound threaded through the silence, weaving a slender thread of sound into the dense fabric of waiting. You glanced momentarily toward where the village lay wrapped in mist, silent roofs and shuttered windows pressed close beneath the weary sky. Turning back, your gaze sharpened once more on the figure ahead. It remained still, inscrutable, a presence as inevitable as the silent river flowing beneath the bridge you had left behind. The ember's warmth whispered against your skin, fragile and steady, a quiet defiance amid the growing cold and shadows. A slow breath escaped your lips, a faint cloud that vanished swiftly into the waiting air. Each step forward now felt iconic, a deliberate measure, a careful balance between the desire to reach and the need to tread softly. The forest watched in silence, the skeletal branches arching overhead, framing the narrow path that led you deeper into uncertainty. Suddenly, the figure shifted with the subtle grace of shadow made flesh, stepping slowly from the veil of mist. The outline was cloaked in soft folds of forgotten twilight, features blurred and indistinct, yet somehow compelling, a reminder that the quiet was never truly empty, that the unseen whispered against the edges of perception. The ember flickered fiercely for a heartbeat, warmth trembling in your hands, then steadied again. A breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest scent of smoke and long-forgotten wood smoke, trailing away into the vast quiet. You felt the cold press deeper beneath your cloak, the fragile light a thin shield against the unraveling dark. In that suspended moment, the distance between you and the figure thinned to a breath's breadth. Something unspoken held fast, a hesitant promise or a warning whispered through the shifting fog. Your heart drummed quietly, steady and slow, matching the pulse of the hidden river beneath your feet. And then, just as the first thin shaft of sunlight broke pale across the rippling mist, the figure raised a single hand, not in threat, but in silent acknowledgement. The slow dawn deepened, the fragile light spilling into the world like a soft exhale. Yet beneath the renewed glow of day, where shadows once clung, a subtle shift whispered beneath the surface. The fragile barrier between safety and the unknown had already begun to crack, inch by careful inch, promising that the quiet watcher was no longer content to linger unseen. You stood frozen, the weight of unseen eyes heavy on your skin, as the figure's shape shimmered once more within the mist, and the slow, patient stirring of the next inevitable moment began to uncoil around you. You stood still, the morning light softening as the first real sunbeam crept over the horizon. The mist that clung to the earth and wound around the trees began to thin, unveiling the quiet world that had held its breath through the long night. Your cloak, still dampened by the lingering chill, wrapped you in fragile warmth, an ember's echo against the vast silence. Slowly, you lowered the ember from beneath your cloak, letting it nestle safely in the earth's embrace. It was no longer just a fragile heartbeat. It had become a symbol of endurance, of time bending gently toward peace. Around you, the forest seemed to exhale, leaves trembling softly as if releasing the weight of unseen tension, rustling with the delicate promise of a new day. The shadow you had watched, patient and inscrutable, now stood revealed, not as a specter, but as something almost human in its stillness. Its eyes, steady and calm, held no threat, only quiet acknowledgement. The distance between you thinned until it felt like a fragile thread connecting two wary souls, bound by a shared understanding of the thin line between darkness and light. Your fingers brushed again the worn rope at your waist, the rough fibers a reminder of everything held fast through sleepless nights and uneasy dawns. The bonds you had guarded were no longer fragile strings of tension, but strong ties woven by patience and quiet strength. The shadow took a step forward, slow and deliberate, and for a moment the two of you simply existed, watchful, silent figures in the soft glow of morning. Behind you, the village began to stir. The chiming of the distant bell grew clearer, a slow cadence weaving through the air. Curtains fluttered gently at shuttered windows, dogs lifted sleepy heads, and the faint murmur of life resumed its course, cautious but steady, like waves gently brushing a shoreline, still recovering from a storm. You stepped toward the bridge, each footfall steady but unhurried. The wood beneath your boots, once creaking sharply with tension, now felt solid and welcoming, as if the years of strain had been softened by this moment of quiet resolution. The ropes that had carried years of pressure lay taut yet relaxed, a testament to your care and unwavering watchfulness. Looking down at the river, you watched the water ripple softly, its dark current carrying leaves on slow, winding journeys. The endless flow whispered of endings and beginnings entwined, a reminder that time moves on, patient and persistent, shaping even the most fragile moments into something enduring. As you crossed the bridge, the warmth radiating from beneath your cloak steadied your breath. The air, cool but forgiving, brushed against your skin like a balm, carrying away the tension rooted deep in your muscles. The world was waking fully now, no longer suspended between shadow and dawn, but stepping gently into day. You paused in the middle of the bridge, letting your gaze sweep across the village. Quiet rooftops, crowned with delicate wisps of smoke, gardens fresh, with the scent of damp earth, and fields where the first bird's song spilled like soft laughter. The weight in your chest lightened, replaced by a slow, steady current of calm acceptance. The embers glow, faint but warm, flickered once more beneath your cloak. A small flame guarded through the longest night, now steady and sure. You allowed yourself a slow exhale, the breath trailing softly into the morning air, like a whispered farewell to what had been and a gentle greeting to what might still come. Turning away from the bridge, your steps carried you toward the path that wound through the waking forest. The mist was nearly gone, replaced by the soft caress of sunlight, threading through the branches and scattering like dappled gold over the mossy floor. Every sound, the crackle of twigs beneath your feet, the lingering notes of a songbird felt intimate, woven into the quiet harmony of the world reborn. Along the way, the ropes at your waist shifted lightly, their frayed fibers reminding you of the threads that connect all things: hope and vigilance, patience and courage, endings and beginnings. You traced a fingertip along one knot, feeling the worn texture as a promise fulfilled rather than a burden borne. In time, you reached the clearing where the ember had whispered its last flickers. Now the ashes lay cool and soft, scattered like memories beneath a calm sky. The fire's warmth had passed from flame to earth, just as your own restless night had given way to this peaceful morning. You stood there a while longer, letting the quiet seep into your bones, feeling the steady pulse of life beneath the stillness. The forest held no more secrets for you here, only the gentle echo of vigilance laid to rest, the slow unfolding promise of balance restored. Above, the sky opened wider, pale blue soft with the early light. A breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it a scent of rain yet to fall, a tender reminder that even after the longest shadows, new growth waits patiently, sure and slow. With one last deep breath, you stepped forward, the path ahead clear now, the weight of unseen eyes lifted. The fragile threshold between night and day had been crossed. The quiet watcher was no longer alone, and as your footsteps faded into the soft chorus of the waking world, the silence settled softly behind you, a lullaby woven from mist and light, carrying the day gently onwards, calming the restless heart for dreams yet to come.